Okay, good morning. Okay, we're going to count down from 10. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Glasgow! I want to welcome people from Australia because some of my family live there.
I want to welcome people from all over the world because I have family all over the world.
And I would like to welcome everyone from India. Because when I was there 3 years ago, I had a great time at the Congress. And in particular, my mum and dad, without them, I would not be here. Now I'd like to hand over back to Pandora, Chief Executive Officer for Down Syndrome Scotland.
Thanks very much, Stuart, Andrew and Sam. For me, it was important that they opened this event. They, as far as Down Syndrome Scotland was concerned, they had the last word in Chennai when we did the handover ceremony. And they have been the prominent lead commissioners in the marketing of this event. So for me, it was really important that they were the people who had the first greeting for you as delegates. I'm absolutely delighted to see you all here. On behalf of the staff and board of Down Syndrome Scotland, it's been 5 years in the planning, and you all turning up was really important to us. So we're really, really glad to see you. Now, I've got the usual health and safety announcement that I need to make, but we all know how important these things are. So, ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, I need your attention to listen to this. We do not anticipate any problems, but I would like to make you aware, should an emergency situation arise during today's proceedings, an announcement will be repeatedly broadcast stating the following. So you need to listen to this, and if you hear anybody say this, then you've got to find the exit. So the announcement will go, "This is an urgent announcement. An emergency situation has arisen. Please leave the building in an orderly manner by the nearest available exit as directed by the SEC staff." And so I would ask you at this point to look to see where the emergency exits are, and there's at least 6 that I can see. We aren't expecting a problem, but you know these days you just have to make that announcement. So thank you for your attention. I'm now going to introduce Vanessa dos Santos. Vanessa is the mother of 3 boys, of whom the youngest has both Down syndrome and cerebral palsy. She's been involved with Down Syndrome South Africa since his birth in 1995. Vanessa was appointed as the national chairperson of Down Syndrome South Africa in 2003, and later appointed as the national director of the organisation. Vanessa has also been a board member of Down Syndrome International since 2003 and has been the president of DSI since 2012. Much of the work she's been involved in has been focusing on poverty and disability, and she has been instrumental in setting up outreach support groups and self-advocacy groups throughout South Africa. She is the founder member of the Self-Advocacy Movement of South Africa and Inclusion South Africa. Vanessa is clearly the epitome of, if you want something done, ask a busy woman, as she has also recently found time to complete a master's in philosophy in disability studies at the University of Cape Town. So I introduce you to Vanessa dos Santos.
Gosh, hello Scotland, hello Glasgow. It's really great to be here from India all the way over to the UK. So as President of Down Syndrome International, on behalf of our board and the staff who are all seated up front here, guys, you just want to give a big wave so everybody knows that we do actually exist and that we are actually here. We've come from all around the world to be here with you today. It's a great honour and great pleasure for me to welcome you to the 13th World Down Syndrome Conference being held here in the beautiful city of Glasgow, Scotland. This event promises to inform, inspire and influence everyone who attends for years into the future. There are 4 strands to this conference: research, practice, lived experience and performance, with the overall aim of widening opportunities and improving lives. It has really been encouraging to see the high level of interest from all over the world. We've received over 360 papers and an estimated 1,000 delegates arriving from 95 different countries. We can certainly be assured that there's something for everyone, with the unique opportunity of meeting new friends and sharing knowledge and experience. The 4th pre-conference meeting for people with Down syndrome, this time known as The Gathering, which is a reference to Scotland's ancient clans, was an opportunity for participants to share experiences and to get to know one another. This was held yesterday, and those that attended the gathering had the opportunity of giving input and approving the statement on employment on behalf of people with Down syndrome. This statement was delivered by Emeric Jean, a person with Down syndrome, at the first UK Global Summit on Disability, organised by the UK Department of International Development and the International Disability Alliance yesterday. You can read the statement on the World Down Syndrome Conference 2018.org.uk website. You can either put in /work-statement or search for it. And the video on this speech being delivered, on this statement being delivered, will shortly be uploaded on the site as well. In addition, we also had the pre-conference, symposium on health, which brought together health professionals and researchers with a special interest on the clinical care of people with Down syndrome to take forward their professional knowledge. In addition, Down Syndrome International would like to congratulate and thank Pandora Summerfield and everyone at the Down Syndrome Scotland Association and the entire organising team for putting this fantastic event together. You can give Pandora a round of applause. As Pandora said, it's been 5 years in the making, and I know the hard work that goes into this. This is really going to be a fantastic event and with a substantial international flavour, Scottish flavour rather. At this point, I would like to acknowledge and thank the many partners and sponsors for their support, in particular the Scottish Government, who's really helped to make this event happen. Looking to the future, we hope to see you at our next World Down Syndrome Congress, which is going to be happening in 2020 in Dubai, hosted by the Emirates Down Syndrome Association. We hope that you will visit them in the exhibition hall and learn more about them and the UAE. Please also visit us, Down Syndrome International, in the exhibition hall and the World Down Syndrome Day stand. In addition, there are Down Syndrome International will be holding a number of presentations for national organisations, if you're interested, on employment, social media and advocacy. I trust that you will find this World Down Syndrome 2018 of great benefit to you, and that you will share your experiences with as many people as possible upon your return home to help improve the lives of people with Down syndrome and their families around the world. And so without any further ado, let's get this party on the road. And I present to you the flag ceremony.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think you'll agree, those of you who've been to Congress before, the flag ceremony is a really special moment, really emotional, and not without its logistical challenges, but is well worth the challenges because it is just so special. So I hope you all enjoyed that. Our next speaker, we're very honoured to have the Deputy First Minister for Scotland, Mr. John Swinney, here today to open Congress. He's a prominent politician in Scotland. He also sat in the House of Commons at Westminster as a member of the UK Parliament for 4 years before being elected to the then new Scottish Parliament in 1999, where he has served ever since. He was previously the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Constitution and Economy, so he knows about the money. And for just over the last 2 years, he's been the Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills, which in the Scottish context is about employment. So you and I know that both of those are a subject very close to all our hearts. Since 2014, he has been Scotland's Deputy First Minister, and it's my real privilege to welcome him to the podium today, Mr. John Swinney.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and it's an enormous privilege to welcome you all to the city of Glasgow, to Scotland, and to the World Down Syndrome Congress here in this magnificent city. And I have to say, there are many challenges that I have to face as a politician in the events at which I have to speak. But speaking after such a magnificent and inspiring opening ceremony, led by all of those tremendous individuals from around the world, demonstrating the breadth of international interest in this event, is one of those most challenging moments. And I pay warm tribute to everybody who's been involved in arranging that beautiful start to what I hope will be a joyful congress here in the city of Glasgow. And our country is a welcoming country. We like to think ourselves, as a country, Scotland has exported many people from our shores, from just adjacent to the Scottish Exhibition Centre at the River Clyde. Many people have left from the boats that sailed from the River Clyde to other parts of the world, and we've gone out and made friendships and connections and alliances around the world. But we've always been welcoming to people who've come to us. And I hope that that's how you feel with your time here in Glasgow, from wherever you've come around the world. I hope you find our city a welcoming city, you find our country a welcoming country, and that you have an outstanding time here in the city of Glasgow. It's important that I'm honest with you as a politician. The weather is not always as good as this in Scotland. It's particularly exceptional just now, and we are loving it being so exceptionally wonderful. But there is a cautionary note that it's not always like this. But apparently the last summer that was as magnificent as this was in 1976. So it tells you how frequently these great events happen to Scotland. But you are very welcome, and I'm delighted that the Scottish Government has been able to work so closely with Down Syndrome Scotland in supporting the arrangements for what I appreciate is a complex international gathering that takes a lot of logistical organisation to put in place, and it's been our privilege to provide some assistance and support to Down Syndrome Scotland. We appreciate and value the partnership that we have with Down Syndrome Scotland, and we look forward to continuing that dialogue in the open and transparent way that we take forward our government agenda here in Scotland. And it's important that that agenda is taken forward in a spirit of partnership, because we have to acknowledge that we are on a journey as a country to make sure that the support we put in place and the arrangements we put in place for people with Down syndrome is as effective as it possibly can be to meet the needs of those individuals. And I think we're making good progress on that journey. I don't believe for a moment that we have completed that journey, but I do believe and I'm happy to come here and to commit the Scottish Government to that journey of improvement for those who have Down syndrome and to ensure that they can fulfil their potential within our society. This Congress was the subject of a question to the First Minister just before the parliamentary recess at the end of June. And the First Minister took the opportunity to explain to Parliament that I would be coming here on her behalf to extend the warmest of welcomes from the Scottish Government. But she also took the opportunity to make it crystal clear that the Scottish Government's priority is to make sure that every individual with Down syndrome is able to fulfil their potential, is able to make a full contribution to Scottish society, and we have to make sure that all of the support and all of the arrangements are in place to make sure that is the case. And that's the commitment that I make to you today at this event. The lives of people with a learning disability in Scotland are changing and have changed in recent years. If I go back to a landmark piece of legislation that we passed, one of the reasons why a Scottish Parliament was established in 1999 was there was many issues that people in Scotland felt were not being addressed because we didn't feel we could get enough time and attention in the parliamentary agenda in Westminster to address the issues that mattered to us. And one of the first things that the Scottish Parliament did was to consider and ultimately to pass the Adults with Incapacity Bill to ensure that we put in place the support, the assistance that was necessary to ensure that we assisted everybody in their needs. We also put in place another crucial piece of legislation not long after that, the Additional Support for Learning Act, which entrenched in legislation the ability of individuals to receive the support they required, driven not by what the public sector and the government believed they should have, but based on the principle of what that individual required to fulfil their potential. And that legislative presumption, where government and the Parliament decided that we had to make sure that individuals, whatever their circumstances, had to have every opportunity to fulfil their potential, set a legislative standard and benchmark which we believed was appropriate, which we believed was essential to meet the needs of individuals within our society, and which was of greater importance than any of those things. It was the fundamental right of those individuals to have access to those opportunities regardless of the learning disability that they had. And that commitment is enshrined in legislation in Scotland, and what we try to do is to make sure that we live up to the fulfilment of that legislative promise in all of the approaches that we take, so that the requirements of the law, that each individual is able to attract and receive the support that they need to ensure that they can make a strong and effective contribution to our society, is a fundamental part of the promise that is made to individuals with Down syndrome in Scotland, and it's a promise that we must be deadly serious about fulfilling, whether we work in the Scottish Government, or whether we work in local authorities, or whether we work in some of our vital third sector organisations that provide much of this important support and assistance to individuals in our society. And that commitment in law is reinforced by a really important policy principle that we adopted about 15 years ago in Scotland. And it's a principle called getting it right for every child. And it's founded on the principle that we have to look at the needs and the circumstances of each individual and to make sure that we put in place the necessary arrangements to meet the needs of that individual. And in all of the things that I do as the Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills, I am thinking on a daily basis about whether or not we are getting it right for every child, whether we are getting it right for every child as they become an adult, to make sure that we fulfil that promise, that we have to make sure that everyone is involved and included in our society, regardless of their challenges, and we as a society have to do everything we can to support those individuals to fulfil their potential. And I'm not going to stand here today and say that Scotland has somehow reached a point of perfection in the delivery of that support, because there will, of course, be examples where we do not do as well as we should do. But I think if we stand back and objectively look at the situation that we see in Scotland today in 2018, with the benefits of 15 years of being focused on the principle of getting it right for every child, on the principle of ensuring that we meet the additional support needs of individuals with learning difficulties, I think we can recognise that our country is in a better place today in the support that we make available to individuals with additional learning requirements and needs than we were when we started out on this journey 15 years ago. And the commitment I give to you today is that we will continue to relentlessly focus on delivering on that agenda as we take it forward in the years to come. And that means challenging how effective we are in government, how effective we are in local government, how effective we are in the legislation we take forward to make sure that every individual, regardless of their background, is able to make a strong contribution to our society, and our legislative framework is designed to enable us to do exactly that. So I hope when you see examples within Scotland, when you go through your programme here at this Congress, that you hear about an environment and an atmosphere that is focused on inclusion, that is focused on welcoming individuals into our society and making sure that they attract the support that they require. Now, one of the issues where there is the greatest opportunity for us to make progress in this respect, one of the greatest opportunities for us to thrive as a society and to get great benefits, is in the field of employment and skills. Because what I notice, and I notice it in the many projects that I have the privilege to visit around the country, is that I come across individuals who have additional learning needs, individuals with Down syndrome, now able to make a contribution to our society based on the employment opportunities that employers are creating and designing to make sure that individuals can have access to those opportunities. Now, if I think about a local store in my own constituency in Perthshire, which I frequent on a regular basis, there are a couple of individuals in the workforce of that store who are individuals with Down syndrome, who are making a wonderful contribution to our local economy and our local society. And out of all of their contribution in that local store, they are delivering, yes, an economic contribution. They are making a contribution to our society, but they are also making a contribution to creating a joyful, welcoming environment for customers and for other staff as part of their work. And it is something incredibly special to experience and to see. And it's examples like that that I want to see happening in more frequently around our country as we create the economic and employment opportunities for individuals with Down syndrome to make a contribution to our society. And that means that we have to make sure that we have in place the necessary arrangements to support individuals to make that contribution to our society. We're committed to making sure that people with disabilities can make a contribution in a fair and sustainable way suitable to their needs and skills within our economy. We've said that we will have the disability employment gap, which currently stands at around 35%, and we've put in place the very practical measures to make sure we stand reasonable chances of making sure that can be the case. We've now attached the highest level of modern apprenticeship funding through the implementation of the Qualities Action Plan for Modern Apprenticeships, which supports young people with disabilities to gain access to modern apprenticeships. Through the devolution of employment services, We've established Fair Start Scotland. And Pandora's raised with me this morning, as she's raised with our Employment Minister, some of the challenges that these services face in meeting the needs of individuals with disabilities, and particularly individuals with Down syndrome. And we're committed to addressing those issues to make sure there are no obstacles and no barriers to creating the opportunities for individuals to contribute. We're also delivering a disability internship programme, which is a 2-year programme within the National Health Service of an internship for disabled graduates leading to the Learning Disability Employment Programme, which will create the employment opportunities of a sustainable nature for individuals to contribute to our workforce. And our First Minister announced up to £1 million of funding to individual businesses to help them to create the employment opportunities that individuals will require. So I hope out of these measures I give you a flavour of our determination as a society to make sure that we do everything we can to live up to that promise of fulfilling the invitation and the participation of individuals with Down syndrome in our economy and in our society. So I hope at this Congress you see a lot more of what we are doing in Scotland, and I hope, as importantly, we learn in Scotland from the international expertise that is coming here to provide the leadership and the direction to this Congress. And that's the very special, precious element that the hosting of the World Congress gives to us in Scotland. It gives us an opportunity not to rest on our laurels, not to say everything in Scotland is fabulous, but to learn from the best international practice and to make sure that's available to our citizens here in Scotland so they can fulfil their potential. In 2012, on World Down Syndrome Awareness Day, the Secretary-General of the United Nations stated this: "On this day, let us reaffirm that persons with Down syndrome are entitled to the full and effective enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms. Let us each do our part to enable children and persons with Down syndrome to participate fully in the development and life of their societies on an equal basis with others. Let us build an inclusive society for all." We are spending our time in Scotland responding positively to that important challenge set out by the Secretary-General of the United Nations. We are determined to create the opportunities for individuals with Down syndrome to participate fully, as the Secretary-General said, in the development and the life of our society on an equal basis with others. Our ability to do that will be enhanced by hosting the World Congress of Down syndrome organisations around the world. We look forward to welcoming you, to providing you with the hospitality in our city of Glasgow, and to learning from the dialogue that takes place as we take forward work to ensure that we do everything we can to create an inclusive Scotland for everyone with Down syndrome. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Mr. Swinney. That was very heartening, and I have no doubt that I will be at your door and hold you to your commitments and your promises. And I'm sure you'll rise to the challenge admirably. Our next speaker is Professor of Developmental Disabilities at the University of Ulster in Northern Ireland, Roy McConkey. I'm going to repeat myself there. Roy is a psychologist by training and a native of Belfast. He has previously held posts in England, Scotland, the Republic of Ireland. He's a visiting professor at the University of Cape Town, South Africa, the University of Sydney, and at Trinity College, Dublin. Your air miles must be fabulous, Roy. He has worked in the field of intellectual disability for 40 years and has authored, co-authored and edited over 15 books and published nearly 150 book chapters and research papers in learned journals. He has acted as a consultant to various United Nations agencies and international NGOs. This work has taken him to some 20 countries in Africa, Asia, and South America. I know he's very much a previous friend to Congress, so it's my pleasure to welcome Roy McConkey.
Thanks, Pandora. I want to take up what John has been talking about, and that is this whole idea of social inclusion an impossible dream? And if we believe it can be possible, what do we need to do about it? Well, I say all that to let you get used to the voice. It is an Irish accent, but for 10 very happy years, Scotland was my adopted home. And indeed, even if you go back to my forebears, it's quite likely that I, like some of you in this room, have inherited some Scottish genes, because I am a member of the clan Robertson. Now, I should warn you that the slogan of our clan is that we're fierce when roused. So do stay on the right side of us. There's the tartans. One's the dress tartan, one's the hunting tartan. But I wonder if there are any fellow clan members here. Because if your name is Robertson, if it's Duncan, if it's Reed, if even your mother's maiden name. So can I show of hands, are there any of the clan Robertson here with us today? Is it just you and me? Oh, there's a few more. Well, the great thing about you coming to Scotland is that you'll be able to get to know what Scotland's like. For example, the men all go around wearing skirts. Yeah? In fact, is there anybody wearing skirts other than the young man that was the flag carrier? Or we always play bagpipes? How many people here can play bagpipes? Look at the hands. Hundreds of them. No, I don't think there's too many bagpipes. And of course, a lot of people do drink Scotch whiskey, but I suspect a more popular drink is iron brew. Have you heard of iron brew? Well, if you haven't tasted it, wow, you've got a good opportunity to do when you're here. And of course, you would want to have a taste of haggis, wouldn't you? Every other day we have haggis, sometimes in the morning, sometimes for an evening meal. Isn't that right? No, we're much more likely to go for deep-fried Mars bars, which is a real speciality of Scotland. So a combination of iron brew and deep-fried Mars bars, and you'll know how the Scots live and die early, sad to say. And of course, there's plenty of monsters all around Scotland. Hands up, all of you who have seen the Loch Ness Monster. Oh, you have? You're quite delusional, aren't you? Because the one thing that Scotland specialises in is not monsters, but little things called midgies. Now, if you haven't experienced a midgie, they'll soon come calling, and that'll start you scratching, because they're like little mosquitoes that give you a little bite, and you can be well covered in that. But see, the thing is that when we talk about people like the Scots, we're talking in stereotypes. These types of fixed ideas that present some sort of, constant view that everybody in Scotland must be like this. But of course, that's not true at all. And yet it is a human failing that very often we like to categorize people like that. For example, people with Down syndrome. We might well think of them as always being happy. Now, all of my friends here, all the flag bearers, for example, are you always happy? Yes or no? Big shout. Can I check that with your parents now? Are your sons and daughters always happy? No. There's a bit of a wake-up call for you. Are they always musical? All my friends, are you musical? Yes. Shall we check with your parents? Parents, are they always musical? Yes. Oh, a bit of a mixed result there. Of course, we might also say that they're friendly, or we could say that they're also very loyal people. But again, that may not be true. Because in a sense, everybody is different. We've got our unique talents, or as John was saying, we each have our own potential. And yet, there is one thing that often marks out people with Down syndrome all over the world, just as it does other people with disabilities. And that is that they're very often socially excluded. They get left out. And that can be worse in some countries than in others. It can happen not just at a national level, but it can happen at the level of a local community where people get bullied and called names. And we know from research done all around the world that if you're excluded, whether it's because of your gender, your religion, your ethnicity or whatever, or because of your disability, then you're much more likely to be lonely, to have poorer health, your emotional well-being is also threatened. You're likely to be unemployed and not have work, and you're likely to be poor. As Vanessa said right at the outset, millions of people with Down syndrome around the world live in very poor circumstances. And often their social exclusion is what makes life both less worth living, and not surprisingly, they don't live as long as other people. So what do we do about that? Well, when I said to some of my friends with Down syndrome, among other disabilities, this was some work we were doing with Special Olympics, we gathered together athletes from different countries around the world who were taking part in some of the Special Olympic Games. And we asked them the question, what does it mean for you to be left out? But also, what would it mean for you to be included? And they had a lovely phrase that summarized it: togetherness. Doing things together is really the essence of inclusion. And when people are doing things together, you find that they've got many more friends. They've got better physical health. They've better mental health, less depressed, less anxious. They've even got opportunities to work. Sometimes it's paid, sometimes it's voluntary, but it gives them a lot more self-confidence and esteem, and possibly a bit more extra money to spend. So it's really worthwhile trying to ensure that we bring people together. And what I want to explore with you is how we might do that in terms of overcoming the forces that keep people apart. Because many babies, when they're born, and many people as they grow up with Down syndrome, are really apart from their families, from their local communities, and from the wider society. And sometimes that's because we see them not as individuals, not even as babies, but we see them as people who are different. Way back centuries ago in Ireland, they had the theory that people born with Down syndrome, although they didn't recognize it as that then, were what they called changeling. An evil spirit had come along and taken away the perfect child and left this changeling. Someone who was different, who wasn't of this world, possibly. And those attitudes of difference still persist in many countries around the world. Or maybe it's because the shame that comes as people try to explain and make sense of why this baby is different to other babies. And people will say, well, it's the mother's fault. There's something wrong with her side of the family. That's what's caused it. Or the belief in evil spirits might make people feel that we better not have any contact with this child or with their family because it might affect us and our standing. So people get hidden away. The shame and the stigma associated with that condition has been prevalent all over the world. And still, you could argue, you'll find it in pockets within Scotland and other countries. So we can't be complacent that we've overcome that stigma. And to some extent, by treating people special, which has brought very good results, I must say, in terms of special schooling, for example. But one of the downsides has been that these special facilities are often segregated. that take people out of their local communities rather than keeping them within their communities. When I was working in Ireland some years back, we said to mothers, why have you chosen to send your child to an inclusive nursery or an inclusive school? Because there's some very good special clinics that your child could be going to. And this mum said, well, you know, there's one simple test that proved to me my decision was right. My daughter got 20 invitations to birthday parties last year. Would she have got that if she had gone to a special school? So even the little things that we do with the best of intentions sometimes can take people away and lead them to very separate times, and creating this notion of there's them and there's us. But in togetherness means there only should be us. And how do we make that happen? Well, a life together for the child has to start with their integration into the family. The family is the bedrock on which inclusion will be built. And sad to say, there are families around the world who still reject children with Down syndrome. Indeed, in this country, as in other countries up to 2 generations ago, professionals were saying to families, no, I think you better put the child away because they'll never do anything. And they'll only make life too hard for you. So we were actively including families to exclude children. But now that we realize how important it is, and a tribute to all you parents here, against all the odds, you have welcomed children into your families in a way that others in this society would not have done so. And it's from being included in the family that you get the link into local communities. Communities of interest, the neighbours, the play schools, the sports activities, the church groups, the boys' brigade, the girls' brigade, all those little community activities that when you add it up together adds to a much more inclusive community. And beyond that, well then we've got the whole societal structures that John talked about, where you've got the policies and procedures, the government services that are provided. Are they inclusive of people with Down syndrome? And can we make them so? As John explained, aspirations to make employment more inclusive. So society really does have an important role to play. And there's a virtuous circle here, because what families do increases community inclusion, and what community inclusion increases is the likelihood of societal inclusion. And when you have got societal inclusion, then you can use the laws and the procedures that John talked about for them to influence what happens at local communities and to give families support who might otherwise be struggling to try and help their child to become included. Is that a possible dream or an impossible dream? Well, I think we're getting examples from all over the world that that can happen. That when you have that circle developing, then things can become much more inclusive. But what needs to happen at each of those levels if we're going to bring a life together? There's 4 things I want to talk to you about that cumulatively add to the likelihood of greater inclusion in any one of those different sectors, those circles. And let's look at the very first one. This seems the most obvious, and yet in many ways it's something we can easily ignore the importance of. People with Down syndrome need to be present. They can't be in another room when we're talking about them. They can't be elsewhere if we really want to make them part of us. And one of the joys I've had of coming to different Down syndrome international conferences, from Sydney in 2000 through Cape Town and now here in Glasgow, is to see the increasing number of young people with Down syndrome being part of this Congress. There was another Congress held in Birmingham earlier this year, some of you might have been at it, where the Inclusion International, which is the body that brings together organizations involved with intellectual disability, had their World Congress, and they tell me that 50% of the participants were people with intellectual disabilities. That's a remarkable transformation in its own right. where we start to bring people in to the opportunities for them to learn and to grow simply by being present. And I well remember visiting a family in Malaysia. They had actually been in Scotland. The husband was studying at Strathclyde University, and while here, they gave birth to their first child, Fan Fan, who had Down syndrome. And he spoke glowingly of the support he got from the Scottish Down Syndrome Association. And many of the inspiration he got from your association in Scotland, he took back to Malaysia. And he said to me, do you know, anytime we go out to a restaurant, I always choose a table in the middle of the restaurant so that everyone can see Fan Fan. Because I am proud of him, and I want them to know how capable he is of being part of our family and being part of our society. So if we are going to be serious about this first condition, then we have to make sure people with Down syndrome are present. That means that they're being seen, being heard, but also we take pride in what they can contribute and who they are. And you saw that well demonstrated this morning as people brought those national flags across this stage. But the second thing is being present but not participating is actually another step that we have to take it a little bit further. So in terms of participation, it strikes me that you at this moment haven't had much opportunity to participate. So what's involved in participation? Well, what I'd like to do is introduce you to an Irish Gaelic word that some of you may know because it can be a little bit like Scots Gaelic, and help you to learn this word. We're going to do some actions to it because it can be difficult. So the word is rehelewe o, because in Ireland we always go up when we come to the end. Rehelewe o. Do you think you could say that word? Should I maybe say it one bit at a time? Re, hey, lay, way, o. Well done. Shall we try and put it all together? Rehelewe o. Oh no, I tell you what. Let's stand up and we'll do the actions that go with each of that. Okay, this is you participating. Thank you, top table as well. That's very good. Okay, so when we say re, we do that. Now be careful with the people beside you. Do it gently, folks. Be gentle. So it's re, hey, and then lay, you clap your hands. Way, you shake hands with the person beside you. Okay? And then the final O is when you give them a hug. Okay. Now we'll take it a little step at a time. We don't want you to get too ahead of us here. So are you ready? It's re, hey, lay. Oh, no, I got it wrong. You were much better than me. Ready again. We'll do it this time properly, I hope. Re, hey, lay, way, hug. Well, hey, wasn't that good? Do you want to do it even faster now? Are you ready? Here we go. Fast this time. Re, hey, lay, way. Oh! Re, hey, lay, way, ho! Well done. Now that's participation, isn't it? I couldn't see if anyone was still sitting during that. You'll be sent home if you were. So there's a good word that you know. Of course, you know the meaning of it, don't you? No idea. Well, a bit of a trick, actually. It does mean togetherness. It's a clan call when you're bringing everyone together. So everyone comes from the glens. If you believe that, you'll believe anything. The thing about participation, though, is that you have to believe you can do it. Like, if any of you thought, oh, I don't think I'll be able to do that, I'm just going to sit down on my hands, it wouldn't have worked. You had to be maybe a bit encouraged believing that, well, I can do that. It's easy to do. And of course, participation, you do get better at it. You could learn the language more through practicing it. You could learn more about movements by going to dance classes and so on. But the point is that very often we don't give people with Down syndrome the chance to participate. So the notice come home from school that they're going to be taking a group over for camping up in the Highlands. And you ask your son or daughter, do they want to go? And they say, no, don't want to. And you think, oh, maybe that's just as well, because they could hurt themselves. They could get into some sort of danger, or they wouldn't be able to do it, or anyway, they're too shy. And he's really happy being up in his room playing PlayStation anyway. So participation doesn't happen. Sometimes for the best of reasons, we think. But unless you have the notion, and unless you really encourage people to think, well, I can do it, and I'm willing to put in some of the effort for practicing at it, then sadly it won't happen. The third thing we need to be aware of is relationships. Because it's possible to be present, it's possible to be participating, and still not really know the people that are around about you. You know, it happens at church, for example, or it can happen if you're at the cinema, theatre, whatever. You come in and out. You don't actually meet or talk to anyone. Well, don't say we have shortchanged you, because now this is your chance to build relationships. Yes, very much here. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. And in those 30 seconds, you've got to introduce yourself to as many people around about you as you can. And here's the rub. You've got to remember their names. Okay. So, the minimum here is 1. 30 seconds, how many might you do? Are you ready to go? I've got my clock here. 3, 2, 1, go! And time's up, thank you. Count the number. Thank you very much. Well, good night and goodbye. Time's up, folks. Time's up. You lost control. You could have told me. Is the assembly as bad as this? Okay, folks, we have to move on or you get no coffee. Okay. So, how many people got to know the names of 2 people? Hands up, 2 people. At least 2 people. Keep your hands up if you got 3. If you got 4, got 5, have we any more than 5? Have we got 6? Have we got 7? Have we got 8? I can see one person in the front row with 9 possibly, or 8. There you are, 30 seconds. And if you do speed dating, you must have had lots of practice. Then you can get to meet plenty of people. But once again, it's all around making friends, isn't it? And yet, parents and people with Down syndrome themselves often tell me, the childhood years weren't so bad. Early teens, a bit more difficult. But by the time we got into the early 20s and their friends were going off to university or to work, they became increasingly lonely. They lost their friends. And it was so much more difficult to get them into friendships. So yes, circumstances can work against it. And it may well be that associations like Down syndrome associations have still a key role to play in bringing people together. And I well remember from my time in Scotland how the Scottish Down Syndrome Association organised computer classes, dance classes, art classes. Maybe you still do, Pandora? Similar. So there is that opportunity for people to meet and make friendships. But again, we get into this business of, what if they fall in with the wrong crowd? What if they do something that's inappropriate? And after all, aren't these vulnerable adults? And shouldn't we be more protective of them as to who they make friends with? We need to vet who comes into their house or whose house they go to. And so we set up all these regulatory frameworks, particularly of people who are involved in service delivery, where it can be really difficult for people to find among their friends someone special who loves them and they would like to love as well. And we're afraid of those intimate relationships because we're afraid of what it might lead to. And so we have many prohibitions on their opportunities to have what we might call intimate relationships or sexual relationships. So again, we can put parameters around what we will make available for people to be together. So presence, participation, relationships. Maybe the final one is the most challenging of all, and that is to be fully included. You have to be seen as being able to make a contribution, that you're there because you can do something and you have talents that maybe other people in that association or network don't have. And this is where I sometimes think we're far too humble about ourselves. So one of the things I want you to just reflect on now is if you had to make a list of what you're particularly good at, what your talents are, what it is you bring to your family, to your community, or to the society where you live, what would you put on that list? Just think for a minute. 1, 2, don't be humble. Take pride. Think of what your talents are. They could be musical, they could be physical, they could be cognitive, they could be social, they could be cooking, loads of things. Okay, got them? Turn to the person beside you and see if their list is the same as yours. See if they've got the same talents as you. You know their name by now, don't you? You've hugged them. Okay. Has anyone, any pair, got exactly the same list? No? No, I don't think so. Because in many ways, when we look at our humanity and who we are, we often have a whole diversity of talents. And very often, you know, the way we're brung up, as they say in Ireland, means that you're not allowed to boast necessarily. We do it okay with children. Like when they're young, we say, oh, you're fantastic, you're a great runner, you're great at reading. But as we grow into adulthood, we're less inclined to do that. So we have to create people who have talents, be talent spotting, so that we can give them feedback about what they are genuinely good at. And then we have to nurture those talents. Now, I know you as families are doing precisely that. My concern is that when it gets into local communities, that's much less likely to happen. But the people who can make it happen are our young folk who are going out there as our ambassadors, confident to say to others, let me do that. I'm quite good at washing dishes. Let me organise the training kit for the sports team. I'm good at that sort of thing. And it's when we develop that confidence within our young people that really they have a much better chance of having a life together. Now, all that I've said, people not even 5-10 years ago would have thought all that could be possible. But times have moved on. And in some ways, we're actually living at a time when it is much more likely that we could create a more togetherness in our communities, families, and society. because we have much more practice at advocating. You as parents have done a superb job in making sure that the world community knows about the needs of people with Down syndrome. But it's your young people who also need to be primed to advocate for themselves, because what you may want is not necessarily what they want, and it will be their life after all. Second thing, as John said, we are now in a stronger position legally because governments, the United Nations in particular also, have enunciated rights that they acknowledge people having by virtue of their humanity. And because we believe as Europeans that particularly that rights has such a fundamental part in making societies more inclusive and equal, then that's something we need to be promoting and being prepared to go to legal redress if you feel that your rights or the rights of your son or daughter or relative have been impinged. The media too can be a great vehicle for letting people know that there's a different future for people with Down syndrome. And a great advantage of holding a conference like this in a host city of Glasgow is that people in Glasgow will get a better image of what Down syndrome means and is about. So use the media. But above all, we have to tell the stories of success. And as you meet over informally with coffee with fellow delegates, when you go to different sessions, when you're meeting at the parties or whatever, share those success stories, because they will not only inspire people to try things, but it'll also give them ideas on how to do it. And that's what you need to take away from coming all this distance if you've come from all the countries represented here. You need to take away the belief that it is possible, but also remembering that big things often have small beginnings. And it's those small beginnings in families, in local communities, that you can do wherever you live that really will try and translate the dream of social inclusion from the impossible to the possible. Thank you.